What do you know about web security and FileMaker Pro? Hi, this is Don Clark of FileMaker Pro Gurus and FM Database Consulting. The following video is part 4 of a 4-part series featuring Rosemary Tietge, a FileMaker Consulting Engineer. Rosemary presented at the December 2014 New Mexico FileMaker User Group meeting, and it's basically an updated version of her DEVCON 2014 security presentation. So get ready. You'll learn all about the cyber threats you face and the steps you need to take to protect your and your clients' FileMaker data. Enjoy.
Also gave some insight into how the Secret Service works and the FBI work when they start to unravel these kinds of attacks. So again, what can we do to mitigate the risk of this kind of attack? And it's, the same as, what you would do to mitigate many other risks. Patch things, patch your servers, your browsers, third-party plugins, Flash and Java are the big ones. Again, if you can get away without using them in the browser, turn them off. I know. I actually, when I upgraded to Yosemite, I didn't install Java and I didn't install Flash. And then I went to log in and check in for my flight out here the other night. No, and it's just US Air because I've used my computer to check in for other flights since I did this upgrade, but US Air requires you to have Flash. Really?
Yeah,
to check in?
You install Flash.
Yeah.
But all the training, online training is all done in.
That's really useful. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Right. Obviously antivirus up to date. And another thing is, you're talking about users, they're kind of training users or educating users is kind of a lost cause because they're going to click through on those links anyway. Breaches are detected by users more often than by technology or other internal audit processes. You see something, you say something kinds of training. And the other one is logging gives you a good foundation for incident response. Just simply because if you are reviewing your logs frequently, you know what normal traffic looks like. So it's much easier to spot anomalies, if you know what the usual patterns are, than if you, find out you had an attack and then go back and look at the logs.
Well, yeah, some of the antiviruses are actually starting to look at that.
Like the full protection suites will do proactive log management and investigations. Yeah. Denial of service attacks are, something that, again, targets financial, targets banks, retail sector, public sector. This is when attackers send a flood of traffic to a website to try and take it down. It continues to be a big problem and it continues to be a risk for businesses. And so there were about 1,200 incidents in 2013, and there's been a big shift here from bots on home computers to hijacking cloud servers, Amazon hosted servers or Rackspace hosted servers and so on, because those machines have more horsepower behind them and they've got bigger pipes to the internet, and they're not monitored very closely frequently. So they're easier to compromise.
What's the point of these denials?
Tax.
Is there something
ideological?
Well, I always wonder, what's the point of that? Is it one country trying to bring down another, get some momentary advantage? Or if you run a server down, is it completely down, or is there a way then to go in, subterranean, so to speak, and compromise?
It varies.
Denial service on one machine, and then you'll have another machine, like a port in the middle attack.
Yeah.
You fake your IP address of your machine to that machine, and then all their traffic is going to come to your server. And then you guys set it up so it looks just like their web page. And so you're doing the same thing instead of having to put it in malware on somebody's computer, you just redirect them to your stuff.
Yeah.
And then you can
basically shut down their responding so that it goes to yours.
Right.
Yeah.
The flip zone.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's frequently, it's just ideological. It's, you know, because we can.
Look what I can do, I can make it.
Yeah, exactly.
JCPenney's people even worse than you.
Without
Right.
they made $27 million.
Yeah.
You can actually some server and put your malware on it. You just do denial of service on them. Everybody comes to you, and then you've already got your malware on your own server.
Capture it, where they,
Yeah.
they think they're doing legitimate stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The server's unconsciousness.
You know, so, you know, what do? Keep things patched and up to date. You know, and this is to prevent your machines from becoming bots in the denial of service network. You know, another is segregate key servers from the rest of the network. Again, you know, keep those public-facing web servers on a completely separate part of the network than the rest of your assets, because again, that way a traffic flood into those servers won't take down the rest of your network and impact your ability to do things like get email and do business. You know, that's the other thing is, you know, one thing that they do, that the attackers do, is they, you know, take out the entire pipe into a business.
Oh,
Through that.
This whole Sony thing is you know, they're now threatening the employees and their families.
Yeah.
We know where you live, and they tell them where they live.
Yeah. You know, and the other one is, you know, if you use a if you're using anti-denial of service service, you know, some sort of, you know, packet filtering or whatever, make sure that you work with the vendor and the provider for that service and test it. You know, and also have a plan. You know what you're going to do. And it's good for all data breaches. Have a plan so that you know what you're going to do in the event of an attack or in the event of a compromise.
Actually, test plan.
Yeah, test the plan. I mean, that's true for any disaster recovery plan.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to back up two different programs. Well, when you try to recover one time, he goes, it's not the backup somewhere, it's the recovery, because you couldn't recover anything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just a good practice. You know, FileMaker backups in general, test your backups. You know, I've had calls from customers where, you know, they actually found out their backups had not been running properly and they had no backups.
For 6 months.
For 6 months or a year. Yeah, they didn't have anything. So, yeah. So this is pretty much the end, but I've got a few more things. So I've covered all the patterns and how to mitigate risks. And so I just want to talk a little bit about, you know, regulations, things to be aware of. I didn't really dive into HIPAA or PCI compliance, but there's a lot of resources out there on those. You know, so, you know, one more thing. Out-of-date operating systems. Windows XP came out in 2001. As of midsummer, as many as 25% of personal computers in the country are still running XP. It's no longer supported. It's not being patched. Office 2003 is also not being patched or supported. You know, vendors like FileMaker, Adobe, others are no longer updating versions of software that run on that operating system. You know, so as those updates continue and operating systems, you know, the Microsoft operating systems, the newer versions get more secure. You know, the bad guys, there's still an awful lot of XP machines out there. They're going to continue to engineer exploits specifically against those
We're not DOS.
computers. Right. Yeah, you know, so just...
The world is.
Yeah.
Not the US.
You know, and the other one is, you know, as along with that is, you know, embedded Windows XP on, you know, there's a lot of embedded systems that are running XP or Windows E that's also not patched and not updated. So, Java, yeah, all those things.
Another patch, yeah.
Yeah. So, do we want to talk about HIPAA at all? Do I skip through it? You know, big picture. It's almost 20% of the U.S. healthcare is the U.S. GDP. I mean, the biggest risk with HIPAA is, you know, no, I'm talking the biggest risk to database consultants with HIPAA is that, you know, as a business partner to somebody who is required to adhere to the HIPAA standards, you know, you are too, and if there is a problem, you can also be fined and held responsible.
But you know, it's baloney, because when you take a look at Google and Google Mail, and you read the actual privacy and the compliance and stuff, it says, screw you, we aren't responsible.
Well,
And,
for,
and they make it sound like they are HIPAA compliant, but then when you read what it says,
is this
in their
for,
disclaimers, we've got doctors' offices, and when they've got the professional business Gmail, it's
Yeah,
supposed
what
to
you
be
pay for.
right, okay.
and I the doctor didn't believe me. I went in there and I copied the paragraphs that said, here it says, we don't care, it's your problem.
So, I mean,
That's pretty serious, you know, they put it in fine print that it's up to you. They're off the hook. It's right in there, take a look.
I mean, so Google is doing that, but
So
I mean,
Google
as a,
can- you can bet your bottom dollar and most of the other ones are too.
well, but are you?
Me?
I mean, for your, if you're working with doctor's offices, my point is,
No. we
you
tell
are
them-
covered by that as well.
Yeah, we tell them, hey, you better get a HIPAA compliant service because Google Mail
Right.
not going to do it.
Yeah,
So we put in there that in writing says you're using the wrong stuff.
Right. I mean, I mean, there it depends on, you know, what's the, I mean, if you're not building patient information systems, yeah, this is one
They're
more.
throwing social security numbers around in all of that, and so
An email.
yeah, it's-
Yeah.
it was surprising, you know, to the doc when we copied and pasted their disclaimers.
Yeah. You know, so again, you know, for HIPAA, you know, the key thing is if you are possibly covered by it, make sure, you know whether or not you are. You know, if you're doing IT consulting for doctors' offices, you know, talk to them about all the systems as you say, you know, and then use, you know, FileMaker security best practices, the FileMaker security model, if you're building a patient information system, and use the encryption at rest or the database encryption. Some resources. The other is PCI. The PCI DSS requirements. There's, you know, 12 specific requirements for PCI, and again, you can get this from Wikipedia. But it's regularly, you know, it's about the same kinds of data security as HIPAA. But some key things about PCI. It applies to employees, agents, representatives, subcontractors, the credit card processors, and the credit card service providers. So if you're doing IT work that touches POS, you need to adhere to those rules as well.
We had a lot of problems with that, in that all our stuff runs on a you know, third-party server.
Right.
Host their own stuff. It's ridiculous. And the third-party server, when they did the PCI audit, we failed every single category. I got it was like almost 700 pages long, I think, the audit that showed every nuance that we failed. And what it came down to was that our PHP, so the PHP on the host server was out of date.
Right.
That was the crux of the whole failure. It wasn't that you know, we were vulnerable. Of course, so they didn't know, I suppose. But PHP was out of date.
Right.
Which I found fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, like, there's 3 levels of compliance for PCI, depending on basically the volume of credit card transactions that a business does. But, you know, one thing is that size generally applies to the entity or the business as a whole. I worked for a university in a little tiny department, and we did some transactions, but our business would never have hit the threshold of the top tier, the top layer. But because we were a department of that university, we had to meet
Your enterprise.
You had to meet all the university systems had to meet at that very high level of compliance.
Well, there is-
20
we can find-
23 Jump Street is when they go to nursing school.
Yeah.
We were
She's all like, I'll take this back.
300, 350 credit card transactions a month.
Mm-hmm.
Irrespective of that, we still
I mean,
everything.
well, no, it's the level of auditing and reporting you have to do. It's not whether or not you're going to be audited. Like really small businesses have to self-report, and they just fill out a survey and send it to their provider, their credit card provider. You get into the higher tiers and audit by an agency as required.
Our processing was through some merchant.
Mhm.
I don't think it was Costco at the time. I think we'd gone from Costco to some other outfit. And they were requiring that we go to a third party. There was a website where you connected to, and they gave them permission to
Right.
plumb your depths.
Mhm.
And there was no little form to fill out. And this is a whole book you do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it depends on, that is all governed. It's not law. It's
Yes.
governed by the service provider and the banks.
Yes.
And, the payment brands assess fines to the banks, so Visa.
Yeah, we were fine. We were still paying fine, $24.95 a month.
Yeah,
We have no control over PHP on someone else's computer.
right.
We told them about it. They said we take all these things seriously. Never heard from them again.
I mean, so, yeah, I mean,
$25 a month.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so really what it is it increases the cost to,
Little teeny places.
yeah, but that non-compliance increases the costs to accept credit cards. And there's a lot of indirect costs also if there is a breach. You've got the increased audit requirements. The other thing is if there is a breach, you generally get bumped up a couple of levels on your audit requirements. If you need to notify everybody. You have to spend a lot of staff time doing things to become compliant, and loss of confidence. The best practices are to use a third-party service and use tokenization, so that your systems are never storing the credit card data. I mean, that is the absolute best practice. And if you feel like you absolutely must store credit card numbers in a system, make sure you're encrypting that database. But I would say just never store them. You don't want that liability.
We have it in there. It's password protected. That field itself is password protected.
Yeah, I mean, you should not store. I mean, that's where tokenization comes in, and that's the best practice now, where you get the card and you immediately pass it on to the bank, and they send you back a token, and that's what is used. I mean, that's how Apple works. That's how Amazon works. Everything. Like any place where you're, any business, any of the large businesses where you're storing your credit card, like you're letting them store your credit card so you don't have to retype it every time. They're tokenizing it. Yeah, I mean, that's what PayPal's doing. So.
And Apple Pay.
Well, Apple Pay is one step beyond that. Yeah. So some other regulations, there's a pharmaceutical industry regulation that some of our customers worry about. Sarbanes-Oxley, U.S. publicly traded companies, Apple is subject to Sarbanes-Oxley. And the other one that I hear about a lot from federal government customers is FIPS, or the Federal Information Processing Standards. So things you can read about if you want to. And what do you do? What can you do? I mean, one thing that small businesses especially don't have is a security policy. It's a written security policy. There's some great templates out on the web, and there's a couple of good resources I've got at the end. And have that security policy in place. Make sure that employees know, you need to change your password every 90 days. This is what the password standard is. And these are the consequences if you do not adhere to the security policy and we catch you, as I said, me putting Apple confidential information on Dropbox or iCloud, grounds for dismissal. So, make sure that, people are aware of that policy. And educate people about best practices. I have this conversation with my parents and my siblings periodically. And, keep yourself up to date and current also. And also, develop an incident response plan for your own business and for work with your customers so that they have a good incident response plan. Now, and this is a quote from an IT director at a large healthcare organization that, I said, what keeps you up at night, in response to my what keeps you up at night question. The reality is that 90% of what people need to do to secure their systems come down to process and monitoring, which can be done with freely available tools or open source projects frequently. The remaining 10% are the spooky nation state level threats. And to be honest, we are always going to be playing cat and mouse on that battlefront. And really what he's saying is, most of the stuff is pretty easy to deal with. There's that 10% that North Korea, China, Russia, they're going to be going after systems, but those aren't the systems that most of us are using and managing and maintaining.
I read a story just yesterday about the Iranians. They're now, our security apparatus in this country now rates them just one step behind the North Koreans. They're within 12 months max of leaving the North Korean level. And in a way, the reason that gave them this capacity was they were the ones who were targeted by the Stuxnet. And what they learned after their centrifuges were destroyed gave them the capacity to train internally and become very, very adept and adroit at creating these sort of state sponsored threats.
Yeah. So, here's some training resources. So, I'll make these resource slides available to you guys, but because I've got them, they're buried in the presentation. I don't have the text in the recording. But there's a lot of good sites out there for that I found for putting together training resources. There's a lot of free online training for security that you can just point people to. There's a couple of these sites have really good infographics that you can just print out and put in obvious places or email to people. And there's also some good security policy templates from SANS Institute and others. So for example, here's one of those infographics that's from staysafeonline.org. So here, I can just zoom in on it. And, it just, again, contains some statistics, but then also, what can you do? And finally, to wrap up, let's talk about what FileMaker does. So again, if you use FileMaker's security model with external authentication, you're going to go a long way toward securing key data. Hosting on FileMaker server will protect that physical access to data. Enabling encryption at rest and using SSL will go one step further to protect you from man-in-the-middle attacks and network sniffers getting to your data. Again, use third-party SSL certificates if you're going to. And create an account, the password before you share a database. All good things, and put a password on the server test database, or just remove it from your FileMaker server is another one. And just to go a little bit further, we responded, happy to say we responded very, very quickly to Heartbleed in April. We also responded very quickly to Poodle this last month. The most recent FileMaker update is not vulnerable to Poodle, and has several other key security fixes. The D5, the one that came out last week or the week before. And it's just generally about compliance and security. Common sense is your best defense, and it's how you should assure compliance. So, And that's all I've got. The rest of this is just the sort of DEVCON wrap up. Submit your feedback and everything else. So.
That was good. Thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, this was a fun. Yeah, this was a fun session to prepare for. It was kind of nice to not do any demos at DEVCON. I didn't have to worry about the demo gods hating me this year because they have the last few.